I had no idea what a hay rake was, so I had to Google it so that I could understand, and I would love to be picked up for a dance on a couch with a hay rake. Welcome to Read It and Eat It in the Library, the podcast where we talk about three of my favorite things: books, food, and libraries. Joining me today is my friend and colleague Kirsten Hnatow. Thanks for being with us today.
Happy to be here.
Today we're going to be talking about East of Eden by John Steinbeck. But before we begin, I want to do just two quick disclaimers. We know this book is a product of its time, and there are a lot of problematic language pieces in it. There's a lot of assumptions that are not currently okay, and we probably won't be talking about that a lot today, but that doesn't mean that we accept it, doesn't mean that we agree with it. It's just not the topic of what we're going to be talking about here today. Second disclaimer is that this is not going to be formal literary analysis. We know that there's a lot to unpack in this book, and we will not be going super deep into literary analysis for the purpose of this podcast. So we might get things wrong, we might miss obvious symbols and the deep meaning behind it, but that's not what we're getting at here. So this book is a commitment. It is 600 pages long, a pretty dense reading. There is a lot, not a ton of dialogue, and the pages are packed with words. It took me 2 full weeks to read this book. So tell me why you picked this book.
Disclaimer, I didn't finish reading it this time around, and it was quite a while when I read it. Why I picked this book is it was one of the first books that I read that really challenged some deep thinking and your morals questioned and challenged, I guess.
Totally fair. For me, this was the first time reading it. I had thought that I had read it before, but then it very quickly, I realized that no, I was getting mixed up with a different book. So this is the first read for me. One of the things that I noticed when I was reading the book was there are so many characters to keep track of, particularly at the beginning. I had no idea who to pay attention to and who to get attached to, because there were so many people in and out of the narrative that I had no idea what was going on. It took like a good half of the book for me to figure it out.
I wrote a family tree, and I would have to. I enjoy books that give you the family tree, and you can leaf back to the front and see who's who.
I bet if we had a new edition, that would be there. Who was your favorite character?
Sam.
Okay, he was one of my favorite too. For me, it's a tie between Sam and Lee.
Yes, they are definitely, in my opinion, the smartest in the book, most educated, self-educated, took the time to educate themselves. Although without Kathy, there would be no book.
That's true, but I wish there was no Kathy.
In the world in general.
What was your favorite scene?
Favorite scene? I really enjoyed his description of the valleys. Like when you're reading, it's poetic and you can just picture. I just really like the way he writes things. Scene-wise, so many. He just really descriptive in all of them. Like you can see it.
As I was reading, I was really bogged down in all 600 pages, and I kept thinking, like, what could be, usually I blame the editor when a book is that long, but there were parts that were less important than others, but you could see the truth and the importance of most of the parts. Like it wasn't as simple as, oh, you could just cut this section out and it would be exactly the same book.
I agree, and they did attempt a movie that I think completely butchers the book.
Like, really?
I don't think it's possible to make a movie out of this.
My favorite scene was when they're going to the dance. The boys are going to the dance.
Yeah.
And they are, Tom is later than everybody else, and he ends up taking the couch and attaching it to the hay rake. And I had no idea what a hay rake was, so I had to Google it so that I could understand. And I would love to be picked up for a dance on a couch with a hay rake. I think that's a super memorable experience, and like, you've got me. If you pick me up on a couch with a hay rake, I'm there.
Fair. That was humor in the book that I wasn't expecting, actually, for the time that it was, with the dances and all going to the same place on different sets of wheels that they could find.
Have you ever been to Salinas? It's a real place.
No, I have not.
So I have been, the closest I've been, I think I've been to San Jose when I was a teenager. I don't really remember too much about it, but I was in San Francisco a few years ago, and we were mainly in the city, but there was enough of it that I could really imagine what he's seeing and what he's describing.
So he nailed it there in his descriptions.
Totally. What did you think of the narrator? So the narrator is Olive's son, John, and I could not figure out why.
She was the teacher? No, Olive was the teacher, correct?
But what does her son have to, like, what? And then on occasion he would like insert himself and say, oh, Tom and my sister would have, remember?
I think this is a bit of Steinbeck's growing up. It's not a true story, but it's referenced to, I think.
So it's the way his memory works then. Just all the way through, it seemed like a rather omniscient narrator, which was fine. But then on occasion, he would just insert himself. And then there was just those little weird stories about, remember Tom came to our house and then Tom made this, I don't know, made something with it. And yeah, I just didn't know why he was there. But I suppose if that is his real experience, then I think that could make sense.
I think that it is, for me, it was that every family and generation has, so I think he injected his own story.
I have some quotes that caught my attention for sure. One of my favorite ones was, Samuel rode lightly on top of a book, and he balanced happily among the ideas the way a man rides white rapids in a canoe. But Tom got into a book, crawled and groveled between the covers, tunneled like a mole among the thoughts, and came up with the book all over his face and hands.
Love that.
So which kind of reader do you think you are?
I think I'm the second one. If I read a good book, everybody I know hears about it, and it's on my hands and my face, and it's right there in your face.
Me too. I definitely am a book all over my hands and face kind of reader. And that's why I don't really like to read thrillers, or why characters like Kathy just get under my skin. Because when I read a psychological thriller, then it just impacts everything that's going on in my life. And then I wonder, just things that don't need to be wondered about, because, the people in those, or the characters in those, are always surprised by what's going on. They're so shocked, and I'm like, wow, I have that life too. Maybe I'm gonna, and then I start questioning everything about everybody and their motivations. Totally not necessary. So psychological thrillers are not for me, particularly because I get the book all over my face and hands.
I love historical fiction for that reason, though. That is relevant, and you can find strings and attach it to today's life.
Yeah. Another quote that got me was, sometimes a man wants to be stupid if it lets him do a thing his cleverness forbids.
Read it again.
Sometimes a man wants to be stupid if it lets him do a thing his cleverness forbids.
So an escape for a moment?
Well, I think you just know that what your choice is going to be poor, but then you just accept you refuse to foresee the consequences, and then all of a sudden you realize, yeah, I should have seen that coming. That's clear, or everyone around you does. What do you think of hate cannot live alone? It must have love as a trigger, a goad, or a stimulant.
That is where none of these things can exist alone. They have to have the opposite, love and hate. evil and good.
Well, there was this weird part in the first few pages in the book that didn't really make any sense to me. And he said something about flower arrangements, which had nothing to do with anything. And so he said something like, you have to have white flowers in it to make the rest of the colors pop. So I thought we would try that here. And so I'll bring out these flowers. I know you're a fan of flower arrangements. And so you get to make a flower bundle with white, and I do not. And we'll see whose pops better.
Okay.
You get all the colors plus white, and I just get the colors.
Okay.
And then we'll see if Steinbeck is right or not. It caught my attention. Go ahead.
I think he's absolutely, I think he's right. It's the opposite. And you can't have light without darkness.
Okay, yeah, I guess so. It just seemed like such a weird,
It smells so good.
it was such a weird thing that he would say. Like, it didn't really fit in with the rest of the book. It seemed to me like it was just something he learned in that moment. And then he was like, oh yeah, I'll write that down.
I don't think there's anything accidental in the book.
Ooh, I wonder how long it took him to write it. Years and years, I bet. And I bet it was kind of a painful experience.
White and green are my favorite in flower arrangements. I could do.
So your thoughts on Kathy?
Kathy is evil in human form. I don't think she had a conscience. And the whole way through that she was described underdeveloped and yet beautiful.
My favorite part about Kathy was when at some point he says, I don't even really remember what he looks like. Was she beautiful, or is she beautiful, Lee? And Lee was like, she was beautiful to you.
They described her as having Adam's brother Charlie, having lots of the same tendencies as part evil, right? And they
Maybe
could
that's
see that
why.
in each other, and that's why Charles knew she was, I think, but not as evil as. Sorry, I'm not a good multitasker. I've just decided to have one white flower in amongst all these, and I think the good will inherently stand out if that's a representation of good and evil.
Nicely done. Nicely done. I wanted to let you have first pick, but I know you love flower arrangements, and this has never been my forte. But I will sure give it a go, and then we'll see how it all fits together. Okay, I'm using your metaphors, and I'm having dark on all sides. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, show the camera. Super fun. Think you're white.
Does my white stand out? I would argue that your yellow almost does as much, but maybe it's just the lighter flowers. That would be a burst of goodness to me.
Super fun.
But when you think of white, I think of my grandma and pure and the lightness of goodness.
Yeah. The last thought I wanted to discuss was there's a part where it says when they're trying to figure out, Cal is trying to figure out if he's inherently evil multiple times with it in the book. And Lee is counseling him a little bit. And it says, this personal hide and seek is not unusual. And some people are it. They're all their lives hopelessly it. And I think that just really resonated with me because I do know lots of people who are just perpetually seeking and feeling like they're floundering. And I know other people who are perpetually seeking and thriving. And the difference is that the people that are floundering feel like they're doing it wrong. So the hide and seek of identity is there your whole life, and that's okay.
It's okay, and it's a mindset and awareness. I think Cal having the awareness of potentially being evil was the catalyst for him to have those choices each time.
Do you think Cal and Abra will end up together after the story?
Yes. You?
I think so, because I think she kind of sees him for who he really is, and he likes the reflection of himself that he sees in her eyes.
Brings out the best in him.
Yeah. All right, on to the second portion of our podcast. So I must say that for the first 100 pages of the book or so, the only food that they mentioned was salt pork, and I didn't know what that was, so I looked it up. And basically, it is just like a hunk of fat, of pork fat with
That's
some
what he brought for
seasoning.
supper.
And I was just really not looking forward to preparing that for you today. But thank goodness, as I read on, there was lots of different options for what is available for food in this book. Do you have any idea what I brought you?
Chicken soup.
Oh, well, you know, that the winter melon soup, I just got to that part yesterday, and it said that it took 2 or 3 days to prepare. So if I had been more prepared, I would have made you the winter melon soup, because the winter melon soup is like, the method of preparation was super interesting. That it kind of like hollowed it out and cut the top off like a pumpkin, and then you put the whole melon in the pot, and then you stuff the chicken in the winter melon, and then there was leeks and mushrooms and a little bit of ginger, and then you cook it for 2 or 3 days, and then you take it off and scrape off the meat from the chicken, put it all back in there. I would have done that, but I didn't have 2 or 3 days to cook for you.
That's
so
fair.
I made you something different. This is panocha and stewed apricot. Panocha is supposed to be like fudge, and they had this when Faye and Kathy were like, they're having their deep conversation about when Faye was like, you're going to be like my daughter, and I'm going to invest everything, my life for you. So she had this panocha and was picking out the almonds as she goes, or sorry, the walnuts as she goes. You want to try it?
Sure. Thank you.
So I made it yesterday. It is basically brown sugar and a little bit of water, and that's it. So cooking candy is not my favorite, because you have to have a candy thermometer, and then you have to worry about getting it up to the right temperature and that kind of thing. So anyways, panocha is not a thing that I had ever heard of. It doesn't have a ton of flavor, but I think lots of things from the 1900s, like, they weren't really big on flavor in general.
This would be a treat, I would imagine.
Yeah.
It's good. Well done.
Nice. And then these are stewed apricots, and Lee was making these on the counter while he was having one of the conversations in the kitchen. And so basically what this is just dried apricots that are put in a pot and boiled with some cloves and some cinnamon.
Okay.
They smell fantastic. To me, it just tastes like soggy apricots. I'm not sure why you would do this. I was less than impressed with both of these.
I love all food prepared for me.
That's fair. Have you had stewed fruit before?
I have never.
So my granny used to make fruit sometimes, and that basically was stewed fruit. And so she would get this dried rectangular cube of fruit, and it was like prunes and apricots and peaches and pears all in like a brick, looked just like a brick. And then somehow she would put that on the stove and boil it. I feel like she boiled it all darn day. It would basically come out like this. I'm not sure why we did it, or why she did it, not just have canning or something, but maybe it was because it was dried.
Did it smell amazing while you were doing it on the stove in your home?
That part I don't remember, but maybe. Anyways, and then we would eat it poured over ice cream. Like a couple of scoops of vanilla ice cream, and then this fruit that she made. Despite that, really all she did was boil it. But we had it really quite regularly. I'm not really sure why. So the other options for food were, there was a lot of different spirits. They referenced whiskey and some Cantonese spirit that was very interesting. I tried to look up the pronunciation and I practiced it multiple times. I'm not even going to try it here because I could not do it. But Lee had always had that special, he would bring it out on occasion, his Cantonese spirits. There was some red wine, there was turkey, there was sausage buns. That was a contender. I considered making you sausage buns, but then I didn't really know what that is or how it would go. So fudge and fruit is where it's at today.
You did well. I've never read a book from when you first mentioned this podcast. Everything I was reading, I was starting to read from mentions of food in it, because I had never made that connection before while I was reading, which I thought was super neat. And at the time when you first mentioned this, I was something Nancy Drew, and I didn't realize how much Nancy Drew eats in her novels. And I wanted to challenge that, or as you're reading those.
Maybe for a future episode.
Make note of how much food is mentioned in books, because food is such a part of our world, really, too.
And it's really quite defining for many people, right? What you eat says so much about you. It says so much about your family and your socioeconomic status. It's really defining. So.
And what's a special treat? And it can be something so simple in a memory from childhood, as much as brown sugar on toast, right? Like the simplest.
Oh, that was in there. Cinnamon toast was an option too, and turkey. So
super neat.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing that.
So on to the third segment of the podcast is libraries. So we are currently filming in the new podcasting suite at Lloydminster Public Library. We're pretty excited to record here and to eventually open that up for the public. So we know you love libraries because you work here, but do you have any special library memories from when you were a kid?
I remember every library I went into as a kid. Mrs. Wesolowski was our school librarian, and it had a pit down into it, and I remember poems, books, and I just loved the idea of carrying books. It made me feel smart. I remember story time at the library when it used to be in where the Native Friendship Center is now in Lloydminster. And I was a teen when it was in the basement at the other location, but libraries are always a special place. An outing, I guess, when I was a kid.
When I was in upper elementary school at my school library, I adopted a shelf. I just personally adopted a shelf, and I decided that I was going to read all of the books on this one shelf. And I did it. I can't remember how long it took me. It was less than one school year, but I read every single book on this one particular shelf. The only book that I remember reading from this shelf was Janet Lunn's The Root Cellar. It is a book where the main character gets sucked back into time in some sort of war era situation. So she's a modern day person, and then she goes to fetch something in the root cellar, and then the root cellar is like a time travel. So she wakes up in a different era, and she has to live her life in this past setting. So I loved the root cellar, and I'm not sure why that inspired me to read the whole shelf of books, but it did.
As you're speaking of specific books, in my childhood, the author, Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret? Who is that?
Judy Blume?
Judy Blume. And I think there should be a written, Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret, at age 45.
I bet there is, we just haven't found it yet.
Yeah. Books are super, set the trajectory of your life, and you think back of them. I remember reading a book with the time travel and sitting at the supper table quizzing my parents to know if they were really my parents based on something I read. Like, it really gets in your head, some of them. I can't remember.
Books all over your hands and face.
Absolutely. Yep.
What is your favorite thing about Lloydminster Public Library?
Oh, there's too many to mention. Our director's pretty great.
Well, thank you.
I love that we're ever evolving, and everybody's excited to try new things, and we have a podcast, we have lunches for our community members. I can't just pick one. I love it here. I love the community that we've built here. I love, like, from when I first started with our dance parties or in our toddler runs, to watch the kids grow up right before our eyes. If you haven't seen them for a few weeks, they've developed and changed in so many ways.
My favorite thing is also my least favorite thing. And that's the relationships that we have with our patients, that we really get to know them and we learn all about them. But there's a heaviness that comes with that too sometimes. And so I love getting to know people and to learn about them. And it's super honoring to share their lives.
Absolutely.
And books do that with people, right? The space that we have here allows us to just have some sort of instant connection.
Get to know our characters.
And we've got a lot of characters in this library. It's really quite great. So, excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining me here today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. We'll see you next time. Okay, that brings us to the end of our 8 episodes. I'd like to share a few lessons that I've learned along the way. So lesson 1 is, if you need help, ask. I was ready to give up on this project multiple times when things weren't going as I wanted them to. But all it took was for me to share my frustrations with a couple of people, and they offered to help or helped me find other people who were happy to provide the help I needed to make this project a success. Another lesson is, if it's not working, make a change. Part of my struggle with this project was that I tried to muscle through the frustrations without making meaningful changes. And all it took for things to improve were a few key changes. And really, quite suddenly, things were back on a positive track. Third lesson, it takes more than a day to figure out camera-worthy food. The food component of this podcast was a bit more complicated than I anticipated. I had more fails than successes, but although it was absolutely the most predictable part of the podcast, I think the food portion was probably the most entertaining. And the final lesson that I'd like to share that I've learned along the way of this project is that fake confidence looks a lot like real confidence. A project like this takes a lot of energy and a lot of confidence that I don't naturally have. But I bet most of you couldn't tell that when you watched these episodes. Fake it until you make it is a real thing. I'd like to end with a few thank yous. Thank you to StoryHive for providing the funding for this opportunity, for believing in the importance of community and the importance of telling stories. They've put together a program that makes it very easy for beginners to have the support that they need to get a podcast project like this one up and running. Thank you to Georgina, my StoryHive contact, who answered questions, who provided encouragement, and who exercised a lot of patience. Thank you to Mike, who took care of the technical support and editing. You are patient and encouraging, and you help to make the guests and me feel very comfortable. I'm so grateful that you understand the project and are almost as excited about it as we are. Thank you to the guests who were brave enough and passionate enough to appear on camera. Most of the guests did this for Lloydminster Public Library and for me, rather than for their burning desire to star on a podcast. I appreciate your willingness to stretch your comfort zone with me. Thank you to the Lloydminster Public Library Board for your vision and your support. I appreciate all your guidance and your willingness to embrace this project. Thank you to Lloydminster Public Library staff for making this such a great place to work and for welcoming people from all walks of life into our library. Finally, thank you to my family for their support and encouragement. They heard a lot of complaining and a lot of fear and a lot of despair, but they showed support and compassion and belief in me, which was exactly what I needed to find a new path. I'm super proud of our final project. It was fun and it was creative. It was great to connect with people that I may not have seen for a while and share a small adventure with them in a different way. I loved reading books that I wouldn't have chosen for myself and hearing what the guests had to say about them. Finally, if you haven't visited your public library in a while, I encourage you to check it out. You'll find something amazing to read. But public libraries are about so much more than books. you might be surprised to find a hub of community connection and creative programming. Thanks for watching.